More and more young radicals are beginning to wake up to the fact that their entire lives have been carefully programmed by the very people who are their hate symbols. They're beginning to realize that their so-called anti-establishment outlook actually is the calculated product of the establishment press, the establishment communications media, the establishment entertainment industry, the establishment schools. And so we return again to the basic question, why? Why does the establishment publicly condemn but privately support the anti-establishment movement?
You can't keep me down, you can't keep me down. You can't keep me down, you can't keep me down. You can't keep me down, you can't keep me down. You can't keep me down, you can't keep me down. You can't keep me down, you can't keep me down. Down, down, down.
See, you ain't rockin', for instance, you poppin', but you robbin' hip-hop or traditions. You ain't rappers, you more like crooked politicians. Part of whose creation, new nation, trying to fuck us with no lubrication. Raping, never losing to Lucifer, Satan, calling me Cain in the caveman in the cave. Came close, but never caved in. The false image of a prophet you praising. You living in a nation, living in intimidation due to primitive media manipulation, terror tactics and intimidation. We lack innovation, looking for more fame. They control your brain. The gullible puppets of the public get played like a board game. Get your jaw reconstructed. I ain't no puppet, ain't throwing up no diamond. Here's the middle finger, go shove it. Fuck the media posing as experts. Fuck the radio, fuck the television networks. I'm not apologizing, I don't care what the cost is. Go ahead, corporations, you can take back your endorsements. Fuck the media posing as experts. Fuck the radio, fuck the television networks. You could murder me before I let you take control.
My mind is my own and I trust in my soul.
Telling you their lies and you believe in it. The mob-minded media mentality, speaking to the insecure sheep looking for leadership. Television producers looking for losers, looking for stupider viewers. The advertisers dumbing down the consumer. Whatever hype they supplying and advertising you buying. Let me guide and enlighten, they lying. I ain't frightened of fighting. If you get offended by me and my honesty, tell my publicist she never find me making no public apology. Fuck the media posing as experts. Fuck the radio, fuck the television networks. I'm not apologizing, I don't care what the cost is. Go ahead, corporations, you can take back your endorsements. Fuck the media posing as experts. Fuck the radio, fuck the television networks. You could murder me before I let you take control.
My mind is my own and I trust in my soul.
Yo, from murdering children, the dead soldiers, the dead civilians, to the killings and the bombings of the buildings, to borrowing trillions. Who's to blame when the brain of the next insane psycho flips? Brain cells are programmed like they membrane microchips.
But what is the best way to sell big government and then world government to a people like ours, historically devoted to an independent republic of limited powers? The answer is simple. In revolutionary literature, the tactic is known as pressure from above and below. It's the strategy that Colonel House laid down in his book, Philip Drew, Administrator. Deliberately create problems, and then offer only those solutions that result in the expansion of government. Create conditions so frightful at home and abroad that the abandonment of personal liberties and national sovereignty will appear as a reasonable price for a return to domestic tranquility and world peace. The idea is to create a situation where the people are so frightened of the violence all around them that they will throw their hands up in the air and demand, "Federal government, do something." And the only choice open will be martial law. But unless they are stopped, they will scare the American people into accepting socialism from Washington and statist rule by the insiders of the establishment. This is what it is really all about.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th, malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
Commercial airliners. They flew them around the northeastern United States. They crashed one into each twin tower. And one into the Pentagon.
Smoke rising up out of what looked like
One went down in a Pennsylvania field after a struggle with heroic passengers. Super hot fires raged inside the towers, melting the steel supports, eventually causing them to collapse under their own weight.
Almost like a mushroom cloud explosion, and I'll tell you that I can't see that second time.
And all of it was masterminded by a guy hiding in a cave in Afghanistan. The events of 9/11 were bizarre and unprecedented. Yet the government wasted no time telling us what happened,
The heat was so intense that the steel melted.
who did it,
Reputed Arab terrorist Osama bin Laden.
and what our response was going to be.
They were acts of war.
No steel-framed skyscrapers have ever completely collapsed from fire. On September 13th, just 48 hours after the event, Northwestern University structural engineer Zdeněk Bezant published his simple analysis. Simple. Bezant imagined the upper block of the tower powering down through the entire undamaged lower part of the tower in what became nicknamed the pile driver theory. That same day, September 13th, 2001, structural engineer Chris Wise also made it simple. He informed us that the fire reached 800 degrees Celsius, which melted the steel supports. The Twin Towers were among the largest and strongest structures ever built. They were a tube within a tube, 240 steel box columns around the perimeter, and a central core structure of 47 massive and cross-braced steel columns. Could plane crashes and fires really cause what we saw?
It was the heat. The flames there burned too long and too hot, rising above 1,500 degrees. It began to melt the steel.
The American people were in shock. Most accepted the simple explanations unquestioningly, but not everyone. On September 11th, explosives expert Van Romero said he thought explosives were planted in the towers. Curiously, a week later, Romero flip-flopped and said that fire did it. But could fire really do this?
It's hard to put it into words.
To some people, it looked an awful lot like a mushroom cloud. On October 21st, 2001, Jay McMichael posted, "Muslims suspend the laws of physics." I tried to be patriotic. I tried to believe, he says. McMichael points out that a jet fuel fire cannot possibly melt steel. A few weeks later, speaking at the UN, President Bush called for intolerance.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
Nevertheless, videos and websites claiming a 9/11 government conspiracy began to flourish. There were questions, painful questions, about the missing air defenses, demolitions, Building 7, multiple war games, and the airplane passenger lists. A few days after 9/11, CNN published the passenger lists from all 4 of the hijacked flights. No names of any of the 19 hijackers were on there. Larry Silverstein took out a 99-year lease on the Twin Towers just 6 weeks before 9/11, after it had been owned by the Port Authority for over 30 years. Speaking about Building 7 in a PBS documentary, Silverstein said,
I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
A put option is a financial instrument that goes up in value when the stock value goes down. Just a few days before 9/11, the volume of put options placed on United and American Airlines spiked to more than 30 times normal. And where was America's mighty air defense? When any commercial aircraft is off course or does not respond to air traffic control, it is standard procedure to intercept with scrambled Air Force fighter jets. F-16s can be airborne in 2 minutes. The 9/11 planes were flying all over the Northeast for an hour and a half. Was it just a coincidence that a number of military war games were taking place on 9/11, including simulated hijackings, planes crashing into buildings, and fake blips injected into radar screens? NORAD and the FAA were confused. Was it just a coincidence that a bioterror exercise called Tripod 2 was scheduled for the day after 9/11 on the pier right next to the World Trade Center, and that FEMA agents had already arrived the night before 9/11?
To be honest with you, we arrived on late Monday night and went into action on Tuesday morning.
Was it just a coincidence that on the day before 9/11, the Pentagon announced that it had misplaced
$2.3 trillion.
Was it just a coincidence that Flight 77 struck the Pentagon in an area that had recently had the outer walls renovated and that contained financial records, and not in the area where the top brass had their offices? Flight 77 allegedly made a death-defying spiral dive maneuver, then flew in at ground level, knocking over multiple light poles, yet somehow pilot Hani Hanjour maintained control despite the fact that he couldn't even fly a Cessna, and managed to destroy the aircraft so completely that not a single serial number part was ever recovered? Where are the engines? Where are the seats? Where's the luggage? Where are the passengers? Popular Mechanics magazine published an article and later a book promoting the official story.
Conspiracy theorists want to know why it wasn't the width of the full wingspan of the plane, and actually just the simple reason was that the wings came off.
I think what they expect is that if an airplane hits a building, it kind of punches a cartoon-like hole in the building in the exact shape of the wings. The wings did not fully penetrate the facade. In fact, the wings had already been partially sheared off by the time the plane even hit the building.
Perhaps people expected a cartoon cutout at the Pentagon because earlier they'd been shown cartoon cutouts at the Twin Towers. And what about World Trade Center Building 7? A 47-story skyscraper that dropped straight down into its footprint at 5:20 p.m. on 9/11. It certainly wasn't hit by any airplane. And why was most of the steel from Ground Zero hurriedly shipped off to China before it could be studied?
We were able to move 120 dump trucks out of the city last night, which will give you a sense of the work that was done overnight.
Shit! Oh, shit!
A number of early researchers noticed the sheer speed of the tower destruction. An object dropped from the top of the towers would take 9.2 seconds to free fall to the ground, ignoring air resistance. With air resistance, free fall time could go above 12 seconds. Measuring the downward acceleration of Building 7, it is shown that the mass literally went into free fall, meaning the structure offered no resistance whatsoever. This is irrefutable proof of controlled demolition.
It's amazing. Amazing, incredible, pick your word.
The 9/11 Blimp website offered this graphic, asking which would hit the ground first. The top part of any skyscraper is the lightest and weakest part. They get progressively stronger and more massive as they go down. A growing number of people could not believe this was a gravity-driven collapse. In May 2002, FEMA released the first official government study on 9/11. The findings were packaged for mass media in the PBS Nova program, Why the Towers Fell.
As the steel began to soften and melt, the interior core columns began to give. Then you had this sequential failure that took place where it all pancaked one after the other.
If the floors pancaked, wouldn't the core structures be left standing? Quarter-mile-high monoliths of steel and concrete allegedly collapsed and fell down into a pile. This is what was actually left of the Twin Towers. Aman Zafar took this series of still photos from across the Hudson River. The building appears to systematically disintegrate into an expanding cloud of dust, a dust tsunami. Posting on his site 9/11 Research, mathematician and software engineer Jim Hoffman studied the expansion of the dust cloud. He discovered this phenomenon required at least 10 times more energy than would be available from the falling mass of the tower. That's not even counting the energy needed to break the building apart and create all the dust.
Oh my God, oh my God.
Only powerful explosives could explain the presence of so much energy. Public pressure forced a new government investigation. The 9/11 Commission issued its report in August 2004, But they ignored all of the troubling questions raised by the Truth Movement. Instead, they assumed the official story about the 19 hijackers and framed public debate around intelligence failures. Did the Bush administration receive warnings that Al-Qaeda was going to strike? How specific were the threats? How can security be strengthened in the future? The 9/11 Commission did offer one casual little footnote about the frailty of the Twin Towers. Does this look like a hollow steel shaft? The 9/11 Commission did not even mention Building 7. But we did get some very interesting testimony from Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta.
During the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, the plane is 50 miles out. The plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, do the orders still stand? And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?
What were those orders? To shoot the plane down or to not shoot it down? In 2005, Jim Fetzer, Professor Emeritus from the University of Minnesota and noted JFK assassination researcher, teamed up with BYU nuclear physicist Stephen Jones to create the Scholars for 9/11 Truth. The academic affiliations were adding much-needed visibility to the 9/11 Truth movement. Fetzer scored 3 appearances on Fox News.
Joining us now, the co-chairman of Scholars for 9/11 Truth, Professor Emeritus at the University of Minnesota at Duluth, James Fetzer.
No, you're confused, and I hope that Fox usually does a better job on their research than this.
All right, so
I created an organization of faculty and scholars to study 9/11.
All right, I want to be clear on this.
We discovered that practically everything the government has told us about it is false.
Yeah, I want to get into
including physicists, mechanical engineers, pilots, aeronautical engineers.
Sure.
We've discovered that the Twin Towers were brought down by controlled demolition.
Do the orders still stand?
The order had to be to not shoot down the plane that was approaching the Pentagon. After all, the order should have been to shoot it down. Shooting it down would be the obvious thing to do when you consider that you're going to lose the passengers in the plane if you shoot it down, but if you don't, you're going to use the passengers in the plane and also, of course, all the personnel and property at the target.
I think the very kindest thing that we can say about George W. Bush and all the people in the U.S. government that have been involved in this massive cover-up, the very kindest thing we can say is that they were aware of the impending attacks and let them happen.
Bob Bowman is a nuclear scientist and a former head of the Star Wars program. Bowman was voicing a theory that became known as LIHOP, let it happen on purpose. 2005 also saw the release of a video that became the first internet blockbuster.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Bring it back.
Loose Change, written and directed by 22-year-old Dylan Avery. Loose Change implied what a lot of people were coming to believe, that the government didn't just allow 9/11, but that it orchestrated it, made it happen on purpose, or MIHOP. But why would the U.S. government do such a thing?
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
In September of 2000, 1 year before 9/11, a think tank called the Project for a New American Century, consisting of future Bush administration officials Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Scooter Libby, Paul Wolfowitz, and media icon Bill Kristol, released a document called Rebuilding America's Defenses. They envisioned the expansion of U.S. military dominance on land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace. They envisioned multiple simultaneous large-scale wars. But they complained that the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor.
But what is the best way to sell big government and then world government to a people like ours, historically devoted to an independent republic of limited powers? The answer is simple. In revolutionary literature, the tactic is known as pressure from above and below. It's the strategy that Colonel House laid down in his book, Philip Drew, Administrator. Deliberately create problems, and then offer only those solutions that result in the expansion of government. Create conditions so frightful at home and abroad that the abandonment of personal liberties and national sovereignty will appear as a reasonable price for a return to domestic tranquility and world peace.
In September 2005, the U.S. government's National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, released their final study of the Twin Towers. The 10,000-page report contained very sophisticated computer models of the airplanes and the fires, but no effort was made to model or study the actual destruction. They dismissed it with 3 words. Greening has created a mathematical model attempting to show that a gravity-driven collapse was possible.
They stop at that global collapse ensued famous mantra. They just say global collapse ensued, and then they walk away. It's like, it started collapsing, we can go home now. I kind of this takes over where NIST stops.
Greening and co-author Besant are continuing the original piledriver theory.
Upper block drops 1 floor, 3.7 meters, hits the floor below, somehow manages to break the support structures of that floor. That floor now is therefore added to the block. It now hits the next floor, so on down. So the mass of the upper block actually grows, and it just chews away at the building.
This is what Dr. Greening is imagining: a strong upper block pile driving down through the tower. But this is not what we see. What we see is the top part of the building disintegrates before the undamaged lower part moves an inch. Here's a different view. Watch the corner. So much for Greening's pile driver. As the towers were being destroyed, large ejections of debris were observed far below the main front. Loose change claimed they were explosive charges going off. NIST and Popular Mechanics tried to explain it away with a piston analogy.
When the top of that building comes down, all that air has to come out. And where it comes out the windows. It blows out the windows.
For a piston to work compressing air, it has to be sealed. I asked Dr. Greening how collapsing towers could be sealed.
There were elevator shafts and stairwells. The air could be pushed down those. In a sense, the building itself is self-sealing, so some of it would be pushed out of that particular floor, out of the windows.
But imagine for a moment that floors are intact and sealed and pushing air down. They cannot fall any faster than free fall. The main collapse front has only had enough time to get down to this level. Yet we are to believe that material 20 stories below has already been crushed? How can that possibly be? And there is another problem with the official collapse theory. Smoke from the fires was drifting up and off to the southeast because that's the way the breeze was blowing. As the buildings are destroyed, look what happens in this area. Distance between where that building is and that smoke increases because the building's falling down away from that area.
Yeah.
And yet, for some strange reason, that smoke begins to really expand and get.
Yeah, I've never seen that. I've seen this particular video, but that little puff there at the end is strange.
In September 2005, physicist Stephen Jones rocked the academic world by publishing a paper on the Brigham Young University website. The following February, Dr. Jones gave a lecture to a packed house. He demolished the official story and presented his theory that thermite was responsible for the destruction of the towers.
This is a steel structure now from the North Tower. Something glowing there, and then this trailing off smoke coming off of that. It certainly looks like thermite, but there's more. There was molten metal found beneath both towers and Building 7.
Thermite is a chemical reaction between aluminum powder and iron oxide. When ignited, the oxygen is torn away from the iron and bonds with the aluminum, forming aluminum oxide and molten iron. It can produce temperatures upwards of 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit.
I'd be delighted to go on the evidence for thermite, the observation of these iron-bearing spheres, tiny spheres in the dust in abundance, which match what I can do and have done with the thermite reaction. The thermite reaction produces spheres. They're rich in iron, also aluminum. That's the signature for thermite. We see the same signature in the spheres which are observed in the World Trade Center dust. The towers collapsed according to NIST and the 9/11 Commission report in about 10 seconds. You might give it a little longer than that. It's hard to tell at the end, but say 12 or 13 seconds. A nice study by Professor Kenneth Cutler goes through the math, incorporating now conservation of energy and momentum, basically doing what NIST should have done, looking at the actual destruction sequence, not stopping at initiation. You say, well, if we conserve momentum, we have to consider the mass that's in the way. It takes energy out of this moving block of floor. So we say, okay, we'll let it initiate. We'll give NIST that. Somehow you get this initiation of a collapse. Now, what happens? The collapse just does not continue. It goes for a while and then it stops. It's slowing down and it stops.
Another member of Scholars, mechanical engineer Judy Wood, wasn't buying the official collapse theory either.
From the faculty conference room, I went up to my office and I was thinking, if this was a collapse, one floor hitting another, which hit another, what would I expect? And I just did some real rough numbers and a real rough model in my mind, which later became the billiard ball example. It's an example to get your brain functioning. On 9/11, we saw images over and over again. Horror scenes, bodies dropping, terrible things. And we were trained to respond a certain way to that. So people have a difficult time wanting to go back and rethink that situation and relive it. So if we can step aside from that and just turn it into a little math problem, a little mental exercise. The person holding a red billiard ball out the window on the 100th floor can't drop his billiard ball until he sees the blue one from above drop by. Then he releases his. You can get a mental image of the timing. One floor can't start moving until it's been triggered to start moving. So how long does it take each floor to collapse down to get the next floor started? And when it hits the next one, it turns to dust. Supposedly, we're told it was getting pulverized by the impact. So going through this mental exercise, okay, we say every single floor, it would be 97 seconds from top to bottom. That's over a minute and a half. They went away faster than it would take to drop one ball off the roof and have it hit the pavement. So there wasn't enough time for that stuff to hit the ground.
The wars in the Middle East were raging. The propaganda machine was in high gear here in America. Discussion forums like JREF were dominated by organized teams of posters clearly adamant about supporting the official story at all costs. Meanwhile, Judy Wood was publishing articles bashing Stephen Jones, and with very good reason.
At that point in time, there was a falling out between Steve and me. I had invited Judy Wood onto the program. It was actually the last show I had with a radio broadcast on Republic. And we were talking about all the research she did in displaying the vast range of damage, not just to the Twin Towers, but to buildings 3, 4, 5, and 6. Where, of course, Building 7 didn't come down until 5:20 in the afternoon and requires a whole separate explanation. The toasted cars. The massive degree of pulverization. Photographs of this dust cloud enveloping New York City that involve billions of cubic yards of very fine dust. It became apparent to me at that point in time that there was no possible way that an hypothesis rooted in conventional explosives, even supplemented by cutter charge like thermate and thermate, could possibly be adequate to explain all of the data. Now, Steve and I had a divergence here because I wanted to broaden the range of hypotheses for consideration, but Steve and some of his allies really basically wanted to restrict the focus to their preferred hypothesis.
We have 2 towers, huge towers, very large objects once upon a time. Let's look at how they're built. The core columns, huge beefy beams. And then we have the outer columns and floors bolted between the two. These floors are pretty elaborate structures with this webbing of trusses underneath. Can you imagine putting your arms around one of these beams? It's pretty large. I look at this picture and wonder how someone could believe that every single piece of cross-section would disintegrate at the same time, due to heat, due to whatever. And as they're building it, you can see the very substantial core columns. Looks like it's half the floor space. And then they went away. So here we have WTC-3, also known as the Marriott Hotel. Right after WTC-2 was destroyed, had this big gouge out of it. Vertical slice separating the southernmost edge of it. This was before Tower 1 was destroyed, and when Tower 1 was destroyed, the rest of this building went away. And we have these 3 wheat checks stabbed into the pavement. And here is what's left. This little tiny stub looked like it was the base of this tall, narrow portion. Just a little tiny bit of it left. This is looking north-northeast, across where Tower 1 used to stand an hour or two earlier. Where'd it go? From this down to here's a top view of the site. Building 4, you don't have the main body of it, you just have the north wing. Where did it go? Where are the towers? Bankers Trust is 40 stories, so we're missing 60 or 70 stories of building, more than half of it. Where'd it go? Where are the towers? Where are the towers? Where'd it go? Tower 1 is so overshadowed by this 8-story remnants of Building 6. What's wrong with this picture? You should have at least 100 more stories of the north wall of Tower 1. Where is the north wall? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Where are the towers? How much energy did it take? Well, let's look at some pattern recognition here. We have Mount St. Helens. We have a nuclear test in Nevada. And we have one of the WTC buildings coming apart. To me, they look similar. Probably a similar amount of energy was involved. This is Hiroshima. A few days before Hiroshima, would anyone have imagined this? Just everything gone.
Dr. Wood documented phenomena so unusual, she had to coin new terms like dustification.
So what about the dust? There was a lot of dust. As it happens, here is Tower 1 and Tower 2. A large portion of it filled New York, filled the air, went everywhere. And it looks pretty uniform in size, except for the paper. Landed on the fruit. It's like a fresh snow. Here's a view from the north. What covered the wheat checks was aluminum cladding, which you can see those pieces falling off, but they don't trail dust. But the steel wheat checks trail dust. This is an interesting. This is a rather large wheat checks falling here with dust shooting out behind it. Is the building just turning to dust? Why? This is Tower 2 closer to the ground. Do you see any solid pieces of building coming down? I don't. I see aluminum cladding falling, but the rest is this type of dust that seems to trail behind the wheat checks. And then we have dust everywhere. This Cushman scooter kicks up dust that just stays in the air. If you drive down a dirt road, your pickup truck is going to kick up dust, but it pretty quickly settles out. This does not settle out like that.
The reason the dust stays in the air is because of the ultra-fine particle size, below 1/4 of a micron in diameter. Thomas Cahill of the University of Davis, California, studied the particle size distribution of the minerals in the fumes. Typical mechanical crushing creates coarse and fine particles. Very fine and ultrafine particles are essentially non-existent. The graph heads to zero and stays there. Now look at what was measured at ground zero. There is an extraordinary presence of ultrafine particles. This is conclusive proof that molecular dissociation took place. Cahill did not count particles less than 0.09 microns. Is this because he was afraid of what he knew he would find?
Here are 4 consecutive shots, and you can see these columns just turn to dust. Here's a video clip, and you can watch this turn to dust. So is this what happened to the entire building? Perhaps. Let's look at it a little bit more carefully. These core columns that were left standing for whatever reason are strong and rigid. That's a very tall, unsupported column. And the next frame, it starts to tip, and then it turns to dust. before it even tips over. And as this dust cloud rolls out, it's very energetic. It looks like it's boiling. It's expanding in all directions. Tremendous amount of dust.
The behavior of the dust clouds greatly resembled a phenomenon seen in volcanic eruptions.
Known as a pyroclastic flow, this eruption of 1,500-degree gas and rock speeds down the mountain.
The disintegration of the buildings was not the only bizarre 9/11 mystery. We have holes.
So let's look at those holes. If you look at the scale, using these wheat checks here, because we know about what the spacing is on them, you can figure out these are about 24-foot diameter holes, or cylindrical cutouts. Many of them the same diameter. Look how far down the middle of that hole is. It's empty down to the ground level. 8 stories of building, gone. This is a look from inside that hole. You count down from the top, you can count down 8 stories. So you know you're at ground level. Then we have building 5 that was over in the northeast corner. Nice round cylindrical holes. This one turns out there's a roof flap hanging over it, but it's still the cylindrical cutout. This one looks like a larger diameter. But what caused those round holes? We have this cylindrical cutout in the middle of Liberty Street. You notice this outer wall is sort of leaning back, and it's got a cutout missing that lines up with that hole. Kind of interesting. We look down into that hole. It's just what caused the hole. It's open. We also notice these different sub-levels have the reinforced concrete bars sticking out of it. And this piece of I-beam is pretty fascinating. It looks like it just withered away to nothing. It's eroded to nothing, thinned out. And there's another hole up here. So when you start looking at this, you start noticing lots of little holes, and they coalesce into bigger holes. So if we look at all of these grouped together, lift off a few of the wheat checks that are laying over the top of them, we can look down into that hole and climb down into it. We're climbing down into the basement of the second tower, and to me it looks that these folks are walking through a puddle of water. We may have heard of rumors of molten metal, but I see no indication of it here. And this picture was taken a week after 9/11.
Yet the effects of extraordinary heat were all around. We have this fused mass of steel and concrete that's known as the meteorite. We see the mushroom cloud expand rapidly, upwards and outwards against the wind. In fact, the Twin Towers mostly disintegrated into shooting point sources trailing what resembles rocket exhaust. Spraying whipped cream behaves the same way for the same reason. The contents of the can are under great pressure.
as we get closer to the center, this gets hotter and hotter. It's probably 1,500 degrees. We've had some small windows into what we thought was the core at some point, and it looked like an oven. You know, it was just roaring inside. And it's just a bright, bright reddish orange color. See that stuff he's pulling out? What was that, Chief? We're gonna hold off on the water. See the stuff he's pulling out? Yeah. It's red hot.
Another interesting phenomenon is toasted cars. Large number of toasted cars. I don't mean just a few burnout cars. I mean this weird things happening that don't make sense. After Tower 1 was destroyed, that's the second tower that was destroyed, suddenly these cars were on fire. There's mountains of paper in between, large volumes of paper that didn't burn. Why are these cars over here on fire where nothing between the tower and the car is? And after the fire stopped, we noticed the cars are all rusted. Thanks a lot. Then there's cars over on FDR Drive that had another peculiar pattern to them. This door looks like it just wilted, and the frames for the windows flopped over. I don't know what happened to his front tire, but it looks like he still has the steel belting of the tire in it, so he had radial tires. Fires don't cause steel to melt. And we have various other interesting patterns. This vehicle was parked a building away on the other side of the post office. What happened to it? If it had debris fall through it, why isn't the roof destroyed? This side's eaten out, wheels eaten, fire, spontaneous combustion. Here's that toasted lot. Paint is fine here, not here. And don't know what that is. Is it a car, truck? I call it the What's It car. This vehicle is sitting on top of this one. Why is it so rusted? This is the day after 9/11.
Look at these two cars placed on top of one another. I think when you think about the impact that these planes must have had, it's hard to visualize it because everything melted. But here, at least you have some remnants. You have literally an engine that is melded together with other parts of the car. Moving over, you've got another car they moved here. It looks like it's been through a war. You can see the papers, all the burned out papers from the building. You see the soot and the dirt, and it just shows you how devastating this blast was. Look across the street there. You've got a Con Ed truck that, you know, some of the Con Ed people now looking at, examining, trying to figure out which truck that actually was. But that truck too, in terrible shape. So while many of the items, the steel was literally melted.
We see more of these strange phenomena. Cars burning, not paper. Paper in the tree lost its leaves. Paper on the ground, only vehicles burning. That's pretty aggressive burning. Another one lost its engine. Where'd it go? Same here. Engine's gone. So is the cab. And the ladder's just kind of wilted down over it. Van with missing door handles. That seemed to be a common theme. A lot of door handles gone. Different kind of material. This is West Broadway. So what happened on that street? Here's a top view of that same street. This aggressive cloud looks like it did something unique, because all the vehicles along this street were toasted. Maker's Trust across the street had some interesting events occur. This building, according to FEMA, had no fires in it. What happened to this beam? That's not from a mechanical overload. This was a horizontal beam supporting the floors. Why would it shrivel up that way like you would curl a ribbon for a package?
A chemical signature of nuclear fusion is tritium, the radioactive isotope of hydrogen. Tritium levels 55 times higher than normal were found in the sewer water below ground zero. Stephen Jones is an expert in nuclear fusion, so we traveled to a 9/11 Truth Conference in Indiana and asked Stephen Jones about that.
Tritium is an interesting character because tritium can come from other sources. And I mean, backlights of exit, I'm not saying that's what it was, but it could be just something like that. In other words, it can be a contaminant that arises not from nuclear reactions but from backlighting. And so yes, the tritium was high, and that was reported and published, but it is not proof of many nukes.
That's the official story. Supposedly, the two airplanes had about 34 curies of tritium in the exit signs. But tritium is a lightweight gas. It's hydrogen. When released, it goes up into the upper atmosphere. To make it down into the water sample, it must first somehow be converted into tritiated water and sprinkled down to the ground into the sewer system, get diluted by 2 heavy rainstorms and 1 million gallons of fire hose water, and still raise the sample up to 55 times the normal background level. In 1965, in Council, Alaska, there was a building fire involving the release of 3,000 curies of tritium, about 100 times more than what was supposedly released by the 9/11 airplanes. Water samples from that incident showed no tritium. None. Nuclear fusion can be initiated with a nuclear fission trigger. Uranium in nuclear fission typically breaks down into 2 rare elements, strontium and barium. The U.S. Geological Survey took samples from around Lower Manhattan. Barium and strontium were both found in the dust, elements that have no business being there at all. Not only were they found, but the concentrations were correlated. In the samples where barium went up, strontium also went up. And the sample with the highest concentration was the only one taken right at ground zero. Ground Zero fumed for over 100 days through rainstorms, freezing temperatures, and constant watering. Judy Wood identifies the effect as ongoing molecular dissociation.
What is this haze? Is it fire? Fire would have a point source. You could see where the fire was coming from, where it would be the strongest. Also, smoke tends to go up. This is just looming over the Ground Zero remnants. No point source, it's just hanging around there. What is it? This photo was taken at the end of October, Halloween, actually. But what is this white around here? If it were hot, these people would be cooked like on a grill. And its hydraulics wouldn't work. Not only that, they'd permanently destroy their equipment. So they wouldn't have their equipment sitting there if it was going to be destroyed. The people wouldn't be alive if it were hot. What is this white stuff coming out of the ground? And then we notice up above here, you see misting. Why are they misting this? It's not fire. It's not hot. Doesn't seem to be any more where the water is coming from. Water is just being added to this pile. But that's very dense white stuff, whatever it is.
I don't white smoke for 100 days. Sorry,
for 100 days. Well, yeah,
yeah, makes you really wonder.
Directed energy weapon rather than kinetic energy. These are kinetic energy weapons, heat and motion. You know, wrecking balls, bombs, missiles. This is from 1989. Science by Press Conference. This
Is it a
Steve
shortcut
Jobs.
to fusion energy? I don't want to disappoint anyone. I think I'll put read my lips answer here, and then I'll carry on. I think that'll become clear why I'm saying that. Can you read my lips on that back in the back? It says no. Energy is a long way off. That's why I say no. This is our result. It's just way off. It's I think a door that's open to us, but really a door on physics more than on energy. Geophysics in particular could be an interesting area.
Don't go there, don't research there. But then he calls for a vote, and he holds up his hand. Let's vote to destroy the careers of Pons and Fleischmann, and vote that it's not science. Why I'm bringing this up is we want to be sure this doesn't happen again. Here, he raises his hand. Department of Energy funding. And we have Steve Koonin, who was just appointed by the first administration of Obama to an undersecretary of the Department of Energy. And these guys are thinking about raising their hand. Oops. Peer pressure causes people to do things like this too. If everyone else holds their hand up, you start holding your hand up. You don't want to be caught not holding your hand up. But they're determining science by vote.
Opportunism, Jones insisted on going public quickly with his opportunism. Jones insisted on going public quickly with his opportunism. Jones insisted on going public quickly with his opportunism. Jones insisted on going public quickly with his
All right, let's stick there. Now let's look. The building turned to dust. Something did that. People say, well, you don't know of a technology that did that, so therefore it didn't, happen. Wait, you start out with determining what happened first. It's very important because if you start out with what you know, you won't get there because you've never seen this before. But we know it happened, so therefore there is a technology that exists that can do this. That technology can also be used for free energy. Now let's vote on that. The tower's gone. So if this is more of determining facts, did they mostly turn to dust? There exists a technology that instead of molecules being attract each other, they repel each other. What happened is not impossible because it happened. This is another Charlie Pound song about gatekeepers.
So there you go, following them, but you don't know, it just leads to one end. The truth you seek, they want to hide, that's why they keep you close by their side. They're the gatekeepers, they hold all the keys. They're the gatekeepers, information disease.
An opportunity lost.
High in the sky is all you've been fed. I think that is why you forgot your own head. Sometimes you need to be cruel to be kind. That makes me believe you've lost your own minds. To the gatekeepers, they hold all the keys. They're the gatekeepers, information disease.
All the data says that some form of directed electromagnetic energy was used to basically break down the materials of the World Trade Center. And the connections that Jones has between the cold fusion experience that everybody can read about in Dr. Malaw's book and with what's going on right now with the 9/11 situation, it's just a mirror image of him muddling up and then, trying to get public opinion against, whoever his target is. In this case, it's Dr. Judy Wood. In the previous case, it was Pons and Fleischmann.
The important part is to realize we don't want history to repeat. People tend to mindlessly follow the herd. Remember about the problem with groupthink. You think that this person knows what they're talking about and everybody joins in, and look what it cost us. That was 1989. And it took 20 years to somewhat vindicate Fleischmann, but it was too late. And we don't want that to happen again. And it's very important for each one of us to hang on to our own thoughts. Be independent. And otherwise, people get herded off to one side or the other. But what I see here is a lot of similarities with the tritium. What on earth would tritium be doing at the World Trade Center without the ionizing radiation?
And there is another problem with believing in a gravity collapse: the floors. Each tower had 107 floors. Corrugated steel pans, an acre in size, were held up by steel trusses filled with steel reinforced concrete. Everyone agrees that a gravity collapse does not have nearly enough energy to pulverize steel floor pans. Supposedly 107 floor assemblies fell down right here. Where are they? Imagining that a skyscraper or any object can crush itself into dust under its own weight is cartoon physics. The official story has to be that the floors all landed in the footprint of the building, because if too much of the mass goes outside the footprint, there's not enough left to push down, and any sort of collapse would just stop.
Roughly, let's say 20% of mass shedding could be tolerated.
This is Brent Blanchard, a demolition expert and senior editor of Implosion World. Blanchard supports the official story and wrote a paper attempting to debunk 9/11 demolition theories. But he admits that there was basically nothing left in the footprint. Most of the mass was somehow converted into very fine dust and spread all over Lower Manhattan. Oops, I guess Mr. Blanchard didn't get the memo. A few steel sections remained intact. This 100-ton section was thrown over 300 feet to the west, where it landed in the Winter Garden. Tiny human bone fragments were found on the roof of this building years later.
Stephanopoulos is down in Lower Manhattan today. George, I don't know if you heard a little earlier me raise this question, which was actually raised by ABC's Jackie Judd as we look at these areas down below and the video of where the towers used to stand and where is all the rubble gone. And have you been able to, is there any way you can answer that question?
I'm sorry, Peter, I didn't get the question.
Okay, I apologize. Jackie Judd and several other people keep asking us, when you look at where the towers used to stand, there is surprisingly so little rubble. Where did all the rubble go?
It's a very good question, Peter, and I have asked some people who've been doing some of the rescue and recovery work this morning. If you look behind me, you can see the very remains, the skeletal remains of the World Trade Center. And one volunteer, Robert Gerlinsky, explained to me the reason there's so little rubble is that all of it simply fell down into the ground and was pulverized, evaporated.
It is hard to conceive, but 3 days ago, both World Trade Towers rose 1,362 feet into the sky. Visit those same towers today. At their tallest point, they rise maybe 100 feet above the street. And while it's true there are 6 floors below street level, now filled with debris, engineers at the firm that built the building's best guess to account for the missing 1,200 feet of material from each tower is that large portions simply vaporized into the dust that rained down on New Yorkers immediately after the collapse. It was that powerful.
Get out of here!
We're talking here about 43,600 windows, 600,000 square feet of glass, 200,000 tons of structural steel, 5 million square feet of gypsum, 6 acres of marble, and 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, turned in good part into a cloud, says environmental medical doctor Stephen Levin.
I was astonished at the degree to which solid materials were turned into pulverized dust as a consequence of that building collapse. I think it was striking.
The Environmental Protection Agency has been sampling the dust, and one specialist told ABC they believe the clouds that appeared immediately after the collapse were mostly gypsum dust from drywall, cement dust, and plaster, which can cause problems.
Cement dust is an irritant. Fine glass powder is also an irritating material.
The EPA did find spotty levels of asbestos. A sample on a police car turned out dangerous. Another sample a couple of blocks away, not dangerous. But most interesting, in the mix, they are looking, they think, at specks of steel that used to be beams and elevators, marble from the lobby floor and facings. So what were once the strongest architectural elements in the two towers were pulverized, large portions turned into clouds like this one. Still, there is this mystery. If some of the hardest materials were vaporized, how to account for the presence everywhere of paper, fully intact letters, business forms, stationery. Paper is so fragile and combustible, and yet somehow it was everywhere. Robert Krulwich, ABC News, New York.
Just moments ago, you saw it here live from Chopper 2.
This is like nothing we've ever seen before.
As we watch, a direct threat.
Hijacked.
Hijacked.
And hijacked. So many attacks.
Hijacked plane.
Terrorist event.
Terrorists.
High terrorist alert.
Terrorist threat.
Terrorist target.
Terrorism.
Terrorist attack.
So I started freaking.
An explosion.
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 An explosion. Explosion.
Another explosion.
Third explosion.
Crashing down.
The World Trade Center on fire.
Fire. Fires.
Fire.
Fire. Fire. The fire.
Fire.
Fire. Fire.
Bombing.
That a car bomb.
Car bombing.
Collapse.
Collapsed.
Collapse. The building has collapsed.
Collapse. Collapse.
Blown up.
There are still people in there
Screaming. Crying.
Thousands of injuries.
Jumping from windows.
Casualty.
Casualty.
Death.
This is just so tragic. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
A horrific scene.
Horrified.
Catastrophe.
Continue to look live.
Live. You're looking at this live.
You saw it here live.
Never would imagine we would see in our lifetime.
An hour and a half in which the world in the United States has changed dramatically.
We have no idea really what might happen next.
Chaos sorcery. What has been known as the Hegelian dialectic, or problem, reaction, solution. And we're going to talk about what the Hegelian dialectic is, and we're going to see an example of how this is put into action when we analyze the 9/11 occult ritual. The Hegelian dialectic is what chaos sorcery really is, and this is an ideology that was formulated by George Hegel, a German philosopher. The Hegelian dialectic is a framework for guiding our thoughts and actions into conflicts that lead to a predetermined solution. So the solution is already predetermined before anything happens. The people who are putting this into effect want a certain outcome. This is outcome-based framework, an outcome-based framework. It's saying this must occur. This is the end result that we want, and anything else is undesirable and we will not settle for. It's going to happen this way. We just have to convince people that it has to end up happening this way. So what you do is you guide thought and action into decision making that ends up how you wanted it to begin with. This is accomplished by manipulating consciousness into a circular pattern of thought and action. So again, it's a manipulation of consciousness. It's ultimately about mind control. The synthetic solution to these conflicts cannot be introduced unless those being manipulated take a side that will advance the predetermined agenda. The agenda is already predetermined. We just need to create a synthetic conflict to make this come into manifestation the way we have it originally planned and designed. So, this is Hegel's dialectic, and it is not so much that Hegel is an evil person in his own right. This is another perversion. How chaos sorcery is used as an example of the Hegelian dialectic is it's a modified version of this dialectic for a dark purpose, for manipulation. The researcher David Icke has called this problem, reaction, solution. And it's a great term for it because it describes it perfectly. You create the problem to get a reaction, and then you offer the solution. The solution was already predetermined. But I like to call it chaos, confusion, opportunity, because I think it more accurately describes what the process that's taking place is really about. You want to create chaos. You need a chaotic situation created, because the reaction that you're looking for is confusion, not knowing what to do or how to act appropriately to the situation. Once confusion enters the mix, you have fear-based consciousness. So the person is willing to accept all kinds of limitations and control to go back to order. And therefore, that's your opportunity to bring in your predetermined solution and get them to go along with what you originally wanted. David Rockefeller described the Hegelian dialectic perfectly. He said, "We are on the verge of global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order." And it's not the light one that he's talking about.
They redefined words. They got you asking the wrong questions. They traumatized you, implanted thoughts and images into your reality, and made you thirst for the very things they wanted all along.
Whatever we have to do to eradicate the country or the world of this vermin, I just hope Bush will do whatever is necessary to.
On October 30, 1938, the Mercury Theater broadcast a radio performance about a Martian invasion called War of the Worlds. The fictional drama, directed and narrated by Orson Welles, was presented as news bulletins.
We interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News.
The announcer did provide occasional disclaimers, informing the audience that it was a dramatic performance. And the story itself was far-fetched.
The eyes, it might be a face, might be almost... Good heavens, something wriggling out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now it's another one, and another one, and another one. They look like tentacles to me.
Nevertheless, because it was packaged as news, many people tuning in believed
Get
it.
the flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods of fire.
There was panic. Interestingly, many people formed false memories. Some claimed to have seen things, felt things, or smelled things that weren't really there at all.
At 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object,
of sparks and fire.
They're turning into flames.
It's almost like a mushroom cloud explosion. This huge.
reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet
There
Mars.
has just been a huge explosion. We can
Now the smoke's spreading faster. It reached Times Square.
People are trying to run away from it, but it's no use.
And we set up headquarters at 75 Barclay Street.
Where he has established an emergency observation post.
And we were operating out of there when we were told that the World Trade Center was going to collapse.
Everything wiped out.
Absolute disintegration of one of those twin trade center towers.
Do you believe it's hundreds or thousands?
At least 40 people, including 6 state troopers, lie dead.
The plane is 50 miles out.
800 yards.
The plane is 30 miles out.
600.
The plane is 10 miles out.
400.
Do the orders still stand?
Only one thing left. Jump on the plane and all. Smoke comes out. Black smoke drifting over the city. Looks almost like a real war.
This is an act of war.
They were acts of war.
Then what? I turned my head out the window and could have sworn I was dreaming.
It seemed like it wasn't even real.
It's my guess that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of practically absolute non-conductivity.
It was the heat that began to melt the steel.
Citizens of the nation, I shall not try to conceal the gravity of the situation that confronts the country.
The American people need to know we're facing a different enemy than we have ever faced.
And we may place our fate in the military forces.
The United States of America will use all our resources to conquer this enemy.
That we may confront this destructive adversary with a nation united.
America's united.
Courageous and consecrated to the preservation of
our way of life. This will be a monumental struggle of good versus evil. But good will prevail.
I thank you.
The 9/11 news reporters certainly seemed to be reading from a script. No sooner did we see a plane go into a tower than Fox 5 anchor Jim Ryan told us it was obviously suicidal hijackers.
Obviously, suicide, terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. What we have been fearing.
Chopper 5, anybody on?
23 minutes later, they had already solved the case.
All the concerns about terrorism, of course, the name Osama bin Laden was greatly mentioned.
Listen as the male anchor from Fox 5 Washington struggles to find the words to describe what he sees, while the female anchor fears he might have missed the talking point.
The tower has collapsed.
Yeah.
The tower
collapsed. And it looks like we're seeing...
the tower collapsed.
They could not risk allowing the people to form their own opinions about what they were seeing. It was imperative to immediately implant the word collapse into your mind.
One of those towers, 110 stories, has apparently collapsed.
The towers collapsed within minutes of one another.
The second tower just collapsing into a pile of rubble.
They were so eager to propagate the collapse meme, they jumped the gun in the case of Building 7, also known as the Salomon Brothers Building, and accidentally read the script 20 minutes before it actually happened.
On the latest building collapse in New York, you might have heard a few moments ago, was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks.
They already told you it collapsed and gave you the official reason why it collapsed.
As you can see behind me,
we can see behind Jane, and we see that Building 7 is still standing. Of course, Building 7 does drop straight down into its own footprint in free fall time, but this happens 20 minutes later. This is no less suspicious than if they had announced the Kennedy assassination 20 minutes before it happened.
The bulletin, this is from the United Press from Dallas. President Kennedy and Governor John Connally have been cut down by assassins' bullets in downtown Dallas.
The phrase "on purpose" was clearly in the memo.
If it was a plane, was it in any sense deliberate?
We don't know yet whether this was an accident, some sort of planned incident.
It did seem to you that it was done on purpose? It appeared to bank sharply and smash directly, perhaps purposefully, into, oh my goodness.
Oh God.
There's another one.
Oh, there's
another one.
Oh my goodness, there's another one.
Seems to be on purpose. That was definitely looked like it was on purpose.
This does not look like an accident of any kind at this point. Another plane has hit Tower 2, the Twin Towers. You hate to say the words, but what comes to mind right now, terrorist attack.
Bryant Gumbel just happened to be talking to his producer's wife, Teresa Renault, at the time of the second alleged plane strike. Instead of responding to Gumbel, Ms. Renault seems to be reciting talking points, as if someone is there prompting her.
Oh my God, another plane has just hit another building. Flew right into the middle of it. Explosion. My God, it's right in the middle of the building.
This one into the East Tower.
Yes, right in the middle of the building. And right now, that was definitely looked like it was on purpose.
Since there was no real jet plane crashing, they needed to create a lot of confusion and uncertainty among the fake witnesses.
Why do you say that was definitely on purpose?
Because it just flew straight into it. It didn't look like it was, and it didn't look like a commercial jet.
It just seemed like a smaller plane. I don't think it was anything commercial.
This makes it easier to believe that the people who were there and did not see a plane simply missed it.
Yeah, about 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere.
No second plane. It was a bomb. Bombed another building, not second plane. That was a bomb. Who said the second plane?
That's what we're told. The second plane. We saw it on television.
I saw everything.
All right. Thanks a lot. This is.
The first one went off, and then 10 minutes later, this just blew up out of nowhere.
Tell me about that plane.
Well, I didn't recognize it as a plane at first. It looked to me like a charred piece of metal, and I had thought that there was an explosion from within the Trade Center.
From my perspective, I didn't know that it was an airplane that hit the building. I still thought it was a bomb, and everything I saw told me it was bombs in the building.
And there is the very interesting case of David Hanshew. Mr. Hanshew is a professional photographer for the New York Daily News. He took a famous photo of the South Tower right after United 175 supposedly flew right into this wall.
I was underneath it. I was looking at the tower. I had my camera in my hand. I heard the noise. I never saw the airplane. I was less than 100 yards away from the building. I was standing on West Street.
He had this view. Each image in the flight path is separated by 1 second. David Hanshew would have been able to see the plane for at least 6 seconds. He would have been able to hear it coming for considerably longer than that.
I had no idea what it was, and then the South Tower just exploded. It just blew up, and somebody said that was a plane.
It just blew up. A big explosion.
Bombed another building, not second plane.
I had thought that there was an explosion from within the Trade Center.
News reporters at the scene also seem to have missed the plane.
The building's exploding right now. I did not see a plane go in. That just exploded.
News anchors watching monitors were quick to correct them.
We just saw another plane coming in from the side.
You did. That was out of
Yes, and that's the second explosion. You could see the plane come in just from the right-hand side of the screen.
Hollywood scriptwriters are taught how to create an emotional reaction in the audience by having a character in the story undergo some kind of transformation. Don Daler was at the World Trade Center, and he said,
I did not see a plane go in. That just exploded.
But an hour later, he says,
The second building that we witnessed the airplane enter.
Don Daler made the transformation from
I did not see a plane go in.
to
We witnessed the airplane
The audience identifies with the trusted reporter and is led to take the same leap of faith. It's easy to see how the television audience could be fooled. And a lot of eyewitnesses could be manufactured, scripted actors, shills.
I saw this plane come out of nowhere and just scream right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
But what about other people, regular people, who were there and swear they saw a plane? There weren't many of those, but there are a few. If there was no plane crashing into that tower, could eyewitnesses really be made to believe they saw something that never happened? The answer is yes. Such is the power of fake video. A study by researchers at Warwick University, published in the Journal of Applied Cognitive Psychology, found that almost 50% of people shown fake footage of an event they witnessed firsthand were prepared to believe the video version rather than what they actually saw. Don Dahler is cut off and he begins speaking again. There is time missing.
Right. Don Dahler, ABC's Don Dahler, who is on the scene. Don, just give me some description again of what you can see now.
What we're seeing, it appears that there is more and more fire and smoke. What we're seeing, it appears that there is more and more fire and smoke.
How does this happen on live TV? Live television, like talk radio, is fed through a delay of, say, 10 seconds. That's so that if anything unfit for the airwaves is heard or seen, the engineer has 10 seconds to switch out of delay, going totally live, and bypassing the offending material.
We have an official plane story that's physically impossible. It defies basic Newtonian physics. Have gone through the FDNY and EMT accounts, and we're down, by the time you get down to I saw a plane, I heard it, and it crashed into the South Tower, you got one person.
Reynolds persuaded me to reconsider the official airplane theory. I realized then that I had not actually studied the evidence on planes for myself. I had simply taken the word of Jim Hoffman,
collision of Flight 175 with the South Tower,
and Stephen Jones.
Of course, the towers were hit by planes.
Where is the plane debris? Where is the debris below the impact zone? It's not there. Where is the aircraft debris in the gashes? You can see into that building 20 feet anyway. There's not one aircraft part identifiable. You can go to airdisaster.com and look at what plane crashes are really like. A Boeing 767 has 3.1 million parts. Where are all the parts? Where are the contents of the plane? The videos that allegedly show the penetration of the South Tower doesn't show a collision or a crash. There's no collision. What there is a glide in, an absorption, a disappearance of the plane image. Going, well, this is impossible. We know this. 6-year-olds know about this. This is not where there was no crash. There was no collision according to these videos.
Ignoring the explosions coming from within the tower, all of the United 175 crash videos look quite like this recreation using Google Earth. The aluminum airplane disappeared completely into the steel and concrete tower without bending, breaking, twisting, or slowing down. Not one piece of shattered airplane debris is seen. According to Newton's third law of motion, when one object collides with another, Each receives an equal force in opposite directions. It doesn't matter which one is moving and which is holding still. Suppose we turn the problem around. If an airplane was suspended in midair and struck at over 500 miles per hour by a skyscraper, can we really believe that the airplane would go completely inside? Or would the result be something more like this, shattering the much weaker airplane and sending at least some of the material in the direction the building was moving? If this is a better representation for what happens when a tower hits a jet airplane, then the exact same would hold true when a jet airplane hits a tower. And there is another problem with the physics. Behind the wing of any flying airplane, there is a strong rotating vortex of air, like a sideways tornado. It's called wake vortex, and it is persistent, lasting for a minute or more. Of course, wake vortex is ordinarily invisible, unless there happens to be smoke in the air, or a giant fireball. The flame and smoke are forced to curl around the wingtip vortices. Now look at 9/11. We see no evidence that an airplane just flew through this airspace. We should see something like this. The official airplane videos look fake. We don't see any part of the airplane breaking, bending, buckling, twisting, or slowing down. It's unphysical. Ignoring the airplanes, the official 9/11 videos looked like this. They make much more sense with the airplane removed. We see a tower exploding. The wall doesn't break inwards, it explodes outwards. One, time. Imagine trying to model something like this. Animating a shattering, exploding airplane is nearly impossible, while disappearing an airplane is easy. They needed to show the airplane videos quickly. 2. Penetration. They needed us to believe the planes went completely inside the towers, so that we could believe there was massive damage to the central core. 3. Debris. The falling debris would include seats and luggage and people. Thousands of matching items would have to be planted on the streets. It's impossible. A simulation was created that purported to show how airplanes could go completely inside a tower. Engineers and computer scientists at Purdue University created this animation of the plane crashing into the North Tower.
All the animated geometry seen here was created automatically from the simulation output data.
The visualization is supposedly created entirely from a structural engineering simulation. Yet we observe ridiculous impossibilities, such as this aluminum fuselage piece slicing right through a steel and concrete floor, and then the floor assembly coming right back together in one piece. We went to the computer science department at Purdue and spoke to Wojciech Popescu.
This piece right here, it comes right through that floor, but then the floor heals up.
Heals up?
Doesn't it?
No, I don't think so.
Well, go forward. I think it's the same section on there. I guess it's a little bit later. That's a different edit. That's a different edit than I have.
Well, we added credits and we made a slightly longer version at some point. I don't know whether this is a longer or shorter version than what you have, but anyway.
Could it be that you took that part out?
Paul edited the video, but what exact part are you talking about?
Here's the part I'm talking about on the version I have.
Let's talk about this now.
This large gray piece of aluminum right here just appears to be cutting right through this floor assembly here, you see? Turn it toward you. See that?
Right.
It's coming right through. Up, right on through. And then, after it passes by, floor assembly's all back together again. And I don't understand that.
I don't know where that, what exactly that is or what it is due to.
Okay.
On 9/11, American Airlines Flight 11 appeared to enter the north face of the tower, while the exit wound was on the east face, as if the airplane debris took a left turn inside the building. The Purdue animation shows the exit wound from the opposite, or south face. Once again, this part of the animation was missing from the version Mr. Popescu presented.
The civil engineering part of the team should really address this.
So, the next morning, we went to visit Meta Sozin, head of structural engineering at Purdue and leader of the civil engineering team that conducted the simulation. Now, was there any reality checking that went on, or what's your take on why your simulation has the stuff coming out the south face, and in reality we saw the stuff coming out the east face?
Yeah, you know, that's very much like the old Von Braun joke, where he said, "I shoot them up, I don't care where they come down." But I shoot them up, I don't care where they come down.
Meta Sozin also studied the events at the Pentagon. This is the so-called C-ring exit hole. Because it's so perfectly round, a lot of people think it must have been created by a shaped explosive charge. No engine or fuselage or much of anything was found in the area beyond.
What a perfect circle, isn't it? Yes. Well, look, anybody who playing baseball or cricket as a kid knows that when he or she breaks a window, it leaves a round hole. The question is, there was no airplane, with respect to the Pentagon? Now, I cannot blame them, because they say, where are the pieces of the airplane? Where are they? Nobody has seen them. Well, not nobody. The people who worked on the Pentagon immediately after the event, because I went there later, tell me that our government very carefully picked up all the pieces and put them in storage. That's what I'm told.
That may be what Professor Sozin was told, but to this day, the FBI investigations have failed to produce a single serial number part from a single 9/11 airplane. Not one.
The only other thing that was found was the engine on Murray Street. Well, that engine that you see flying off, and that engine they say is from 175, isn't from 175 because the guy's whose job was to dump it off there, you know, in a smoking, smoldering thing, dumped off the wrong engine. No airplane crashed in the World Trade Center. First of all, remote controlling an airplane that size, or any size, is very difficult. And so I don't believe you could remote control an airplane the size of a 767-200 anyway, particularly to hit dead center of the World Trade Center. But the fact is, there was no wreckage from any airplane in the World Trade Center. And by no wreckage, I mean that nothing was found of any size anywhere around. Now, there was a panel of a fuselage that you see with 5 window shades, but when each airplane, American Airlines, the North Tower, and United Airlines, and the South Tower, hit, it was 2/5 of a second while they disappeared into the airplane. So in 2/5 of a second, you're not going to have a panel about 7 feet long drift down, you know, and just be lying there in almost perfect condition, unless it was accompanied by Mohammed Atta's passport. In March 31st, 2007, last year, a guy named Morgan Reynolds, have you heard the name?
Yes.
Okay, filed a suit called a quid em complaint against these 22 companies. And we're talking about major companies here: Science Applications International Corporation, Applied Research, you know, Hughes, all these companies right here are being sued. And what they're being sued for is accepting money for providing a government agency with fraudulent information. The government agency they provided with this fraudulent information was NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. NIST was asked by President Bush to determine exactly why the World Center collapsed. What actually caused it to collapse? And they came up with a reason that, you know, the jet fuel, and it was just so far ridiculous that Morgan filed this suit, and it's 40 pages, and he outlines everything that they got wrong. I filed an affidavit on January 28th, 2008, this year, in support of the complaint and in opposition to the motion to dismiss. And basically what I testified is, number one, why the airplanes couldn't have traveled as fast as they did, and how they couldn't be flown as well as they were, and why there was no wreckage in there. This is a page from a military manual talking about stuff that they would like to get in the year 2025. This is called Airborne Holographic Projector. You can see where I got it. You can't get it anymore here, but was www.au.af.mil.
Is that right?
Yeah, it says, brief description. The holographic projector plays a three-dimensional visual image in a desired location, removed from the display generator. The projector can be used for psychological operations and strategic perception management. It is also useful for optical deception and cloaking, providing a momentary distraction when engaging an unsophisticated adversary. And it has capabilities, precision projection of a three-dimensional visual images into a selected area, supports PSYOP and strategic deception management, and provides deception and cloaking against optical centers. The World Trade Center was collapsed by a direct energy weapon, and the reason we know that is because of the size of the dust that was left of the concrete. It was approximately 80 microns. That's what it uses. It's called molecular disassociation. I mean, it just disassociates the molecular structure of concrete, and that's why all that dust was there. There was just nothing left. But they have, and then when you go into it, they have what they call the hybrid high energy laser system. But when you go in here and get a close-up of this system, it's showing you how they could attack right between Iran and Afghanistan. It's hilarious, you know. That's where they'll be attacking, and that's where they knew they were going to be attacking back in, 1999, and that was published then. So you can see how far ahead they plan this stuff.
This is a real-time composite video I made using an Avid system. One of the two planes was really in the shot. The other one was added. Which is which? We can track the motion of the airplane frame by frame. First, the Alaskan jet. We can see that the motion appears nice and smooth. Next, the Frontier jet is tracked. Its motion appears more jittery. Does this mean the Frontier jet is the fake? Well, not so fast. We must consider camera motion. The shot is a little shaky. Here, I've stabilized the footage, holding the building and the antenna motionless, removing the camera motion. Now, it's the Alaskan jet that appears jittery, while the Frontier jet is smooth. Stabilizing the footage made the motion of the Alaskan jet more jittery. This allows us to identify it as the fake. I did the same with the Chopper 5 footage, measuring the motion of the airplane before and after stabilizing the footage. As we can see, the motion of the plane becomes more jittery after stabilizing the footage. This is impossible with a real plane, but is exactly the kind of problem you will encounter in trying to composite a smooth jet into unstable helicopter footage. If someone were to want to duplicate your results, are those data available, or can you make them available? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a cheesy answer. I can't duplicate my own results, however, because they're sensitive. Sure, they're available, and sure, they're available, sure, they're available. And
repeated emails and phone calls to the Purdue scientists requesting the simulation data and requesting a high-quality, unedited copy of the animation have been ignored. Jared Holmgren has given a very powerful theoretical argument as to why they would never use real planes. Remember, the story is going to be that the suicidal hijackers crashed planes into the towers, causing massive structural damage and starting super hot fires. Later, the buildings collapse from the exact places the airplanes crashed. Any scenario involving suicidal hijackers is out. No human could be depended on to actually go through with it. Planes can be flown by remote control. But you wouldn't electronically hijack the real passenger flights, because as soon as you did, the pilots and crew would be on the radio saying, "Help, we've been electronically hijacked." Even if you could disable the radio, as the plane gets to low altitude, cell phones begin to work. Just one brief message would expose the plot. The real planes could be swapped with imposter drone planes, but you need to target the crashes with pinpoint accuracy. If the building demolition begins even one story below where the plane hit, this would be very difficult to call a collapse. It's doubtful that a clumsy Boeing 767 could be targeted with that degree of accuracy. And you need the plane to appear to completely penetrate the building so that people can imagine massive structural damage to the building core. Parts of a real airplane would break off and fall to the ground. Parts have serial numbers. Even one serial number part being found by the wrong person would be a very messy problem. Real planes leave real evidence. And don't forget, this event needs to be on live television. How do you do it? You do it by planting explosives in the building and inserting a fake airplane into the video. On August 18, 2001, the New York Times reported on a group of performance artists who had taken over an entire floor high in the North Tower. They were called Gelatin, and their art was called The Bee Thing. They had put up a maze of cardboard so that visitors could not see what they were up to. They left behind sketches that showed the exact number and location of core and perimeter columns, with lines that appear to show the direction of something entering the tower from outside. They removed windows and built a balcony. And this just happened to be at exactly the level where American Airlines Flight 11 would appear to hit just 3 weeks after the Times article ran. Performance art? Since when do performance artists even have the money to rent an entire floor of the North Tower for a year? Nonsense. Gelatin were explosives experts installing a fake airplane crash. And they weren't the only suspicious occupants. A fireproofing upgrade took place on the Twin Towers from 1999 to 2000. And look at which floors were upgraded. They correlate quite precisely with where the airplane supposedly went in. This would have given workers direct access to the structural steel. While much of the perimeter material on both towers appears to have exploded outwards, a few columns on the North Tower appear to have been bent inwards. How could they have done that? By removing floor trusses. Taking out the floor supports would make the floors sag, creating a strong inward pull between the perimeter and core.
Now, you say, why don't many pilots come forward? Many have. There's an organization called pilotsfortruth.com, and I'm a member, one of the earlier members of that. And there's a lot of people that realize that this couldn't have possibly happened. There is no an airplane like a Boeing 757 flying into the Pentagon. No, that didn't happen.
So what happened at the Pentagon?
At the Pentagon, a bomb went off to make that hole there, and they had a 55-gallon drum of diesel fuel that a guy lit to make all that black smoke there. April Gallup was a Army specialist, and I forget what her job was, but she had a top secret clearance. She was sitting about 40 feet from the where the explosion made the hole in the front of the Pentagon, and she had her 6-month-old son right below her desk, and she thought that was odd because, you know, usually when she went to work, before going through security, they had to put the little kids in the daycare. But on that day, security said, no, take the kid in with you. So she had it. She had the kid right below in his little holder there, and she says it was really strange because as she pressed the on button for her computer, that's when the building exploded. And she said a lot of debris came down on her, and she saw the hole over there, and she thought, I got to get out of here. So she picked up her kid, put it over his back, and went towards that opening. And she got through that opening onto the grass, which is where eventually triage was set up. But she said she saw no missile, saw no airplane, smelled no fuel. There was no, no airplane in there. And later in the hospital, she got interviewed by Army intelligence, and they asked her what she saw, and she started to say, I didn't see anything. And they said, no, yes, you did. You saw a Boeing 757 crash into there. And she says, no, I didn't. I mean, there was nothing there. And she's gone through hell for the last 4 or 5 years trying to get medical care. It's been a really very, very sad story.
The towers didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground. They turned into dust in midair, 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 midair.
When buildings come down, the height of the rubble pile that remains is about 12% of the building's original height. For example, when the King Dome was demolished, the rubble pile was about 30 feet high, roughly 12% of its original height of 250 feet. The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York stood 110 stories tall, but when they came down on 9/11, they didn't topple over. They came straight down. Given what is known about rubble piles, we would expect the pile for each tower to be about 12% of its original height. 12% of 110 stories equals 13.2 stories. However, the lobbies of the Twin Towers were the equivalent height of 3 normal stories. So, the expected rubble piles at ground zero should have been about 10 stories higher than the lobbies, and should have buried them. This is ground zero on 9/11. The rubble pile is less than 3 stories high. Where has what should have been here gone? From this to this? Where did all that building material disappear to? Well, here is a clue. Almost all of the material in this dust cloud came from the Twin Towers. In fact, Manhattan, as well as an extensive area surrounding the island, was covered in fine dust from the Twin Towers. This dust is the missing material from ground zero. But what could have caused 2 buildings made of steel and concrete to turn into a dust so fine that it became suspended in midair to then be carried away by the winds? Certainly not ordinary office fires, whether or not they were started by burning jet fuel. Even a conventional controlled demolition does not turn most of a building into fine dust. So the question is, what on earth happened to the Twin Towers on 9/11?
So this video is a call to all 911 truthers.
You have been misled for over a decade. I'm going to focus you in on the only argument that you need to win a debate about 911. It's called Building 6. It was a 10-story building. It's 500,000 square feet. That's a lot, okay? It's missing the interior of the building. It's not crushed. It's not in the basement or something like that. It's actually missing. It's like somebody scooped it out. Now, think about this building. It's missing its core. That's your smoking gun. You don't need nothing else. Nobody's going to be able to argue with this. They can't say, oh, there's a nuke went off in that building, because the core of the building is actually missing, but the exterior is intact. They're not going to be able to get away with saying, oh, it's just crushed or it's gone into the basement, because it's not in the basement and it never got crushed. Everybody knows this. It's missing. Everybody ignored it. And it's not going to be ignored no more. This is something that you have to push out there. I can't do that. You have to do that. It's the encumbrance is on you. If you truly want to put an end to this, you have to push this out, and you can. You have that power. You phone up radio stations. You repost this video with different headlines, different tags. You push Building 6 out there like you never pushed it before. Push back. You have to push back for your children's future, for your own future, and for humanity's future. You have to push back. Building 6 is the end-all to the conversations and the debate. Nobody can argue with you after that. You forced them. You will force them to reevaluate everything that they ever thought. Everything that they ever said becomes obsolete when you look at Building 6. And because of that, you have to look at Dr. Judy Woods, who has 3 degrees and 35 years experience in this field and knows what happened and has a 500-page book that breaks it down.
You know, I'll tell you something, Alex. We needed to capture bin Laden. You know why? We needed to find out how he achieved 9/11, because what happened on 9/11, I believe today, it was not a controlled demolition, it was not nanothermite, and it certainly was not the pancake effect of 2 planes hitting a building. There was something else in play there, Alex. There was a weapon in play that day that I don't even know what it is, but I can equate it to being like a microwave. You know how you can take a piece of chicken and put it on a paper plate and stick it in the microwave and the chicken will burn, but the paper plate won't?
Yes.
Well, something happened that day equivalent to a microwave, and by capturing bin Laden, maybe we could find out what weapon he truly has, because I just learned there were 1,400 cars toasted that day all over the streets of Manhattan.
No, that's right. The cars that didn't have anything fall on them were completely fried, but expanding. Just like a secret helicopter reportedly crashed. We know they're 30 years advanced what they really have, but there's another area that if you look at it, British physicists and others, and it turns out the government did measure this, you can confirm it, radioactive isotopes used in small nukes were picked up in levels off the charts in and around the towers.
No, I don't buy that. I don't buy that.
Now,
nukes were not used.
Well, the radiation was picked up. Now,
no, I don't buy it, because when those towers went down, there was less impact than when they brought down the Superdome in Seattle. And there should have been way more. Those towers literally disintegrated. They went into dust. There's a weapon used that day, Alex, but it's a weapon that's beyond anything that I know about.
What's going on here?
At Texas A&M, a group led by Professor John Bockris, who is widely regarded as one of the world's greatest electrochemists, reported finding the hydrogen isotope tritium, a key signature that some unusual nuclear reaction was going on.
The first thing was this thing called tritium, which was a sub-form of hydrogen which should not exist except in extremely tiny quantities. We found that by working these cells of Fleischmann and Pons containing lithium hydroxide in deuterium oxide, that we could produce this tritium in great abundance. Let's say at 10,000 times more than it ought to be there, as it were. And let me stress that we couldn't do it every time, but about one result in 5 or one result in 4, and eventually we worked up to 2 results out of 3. We could produce tritium. That was the first thing, and in a way it was the first clear proof of the phenomenon.
And but the most important and unbelievable phenomenon at that time was the observation of tritium.
Back at Texas A&M, Bockris's group found themselves under attack. Science magazine writer Gary Tobbs wrote a stinging article that insinuated that someone in the group had spiked the samples with tritium. Although unfounded and eventually proved untrue, the allegation effectively dampened Bockris's remarkable claims.
But I think the main part was that I had done work which was against the paradigm. That was what they were really upset about. People had laughed at it and said, "What the heck are you doing, trying to disprove the laws of nuclear physics?" And of course, that's exactly what we were doing, and succeeding, you see.
The tritium work was the first indication to me that there was a reality. And then Claytor at Los Alamos also got positive results, and so did Howard Menlove. And they're people that I respect and could talk to personally. It became fairly clear that there was a very strange phenomena occurring here.
There are also, in similar experiments sometimes, and rather dissimilar experiments sometimes, evidence of an anomalous nuclear process.
However, it is conceivable that there may be a process even more powerful than nuclear reaction that physics does not yet understand. That is the mystery of cold fusion. Yet as early as 1992, cold fusion experimenters began reporting unusual appearances of trace amounts of different metals such as copper, silver, chromium, and zinc when examining their spent cells. Rechecking for possible contamination, scientists like Bockris and Miley confirmed that indeed new metals and isotopes were being formed, transmuted, during the process which produces excess heat.
Kevin Wolf made many measurements of tritium. Then he got some even more astonishing results as early as '92, which were these transmutational results, the metal forming another metal inside the electrode, you see, which was super anti-paradigm. You know, there's that dreadful word alchemy, which we mustn't use, but it was a form of that in a way, that it was creating new metals, you see.
We see transmutation phenomena. We see helium-4 production. We see a range of methods of getting the excess heat. The writing is on the wall. The fossil fuel age is about to end.
The sword of this panel's condemnation struck with speed and brutality, ignoring the facts in a blind rush to judgment.
Hot fusion physics people have been very vigorous in their denunciation of this being called fusion.
Right away, reports came in of excess heat, much too large to be from any chemical reaction. Laboratories from Texas to India confirmed the presence of tritium, a vital determining feature of a nuclear reaction.
Within 2 or 3 weeks, we got the first results, and several groups started saying, yes, we are seeing excess heat, and but the most important and unbelievable phenomenon at that time was the observation of tritium.
This was a discovery perhaps as significant as the Wright brothers' first flight at Kitty Hawk.
There are also, in similar experiments, evidence of an anomalous nuclear process.
In the free-for-all that followed the cold fusion announcement, hot fusion proponents drew the specious conclusion that cold fusion must work like hot fusion. If Pons and Fleischmann are alive, they contended, then their results must be faulty, since the neutron radiation from the fusion reaction would surely have killed them. They refused to consider that another form of the same process might be at work. In the years that have followed, the cold fusion process has repeatedly produced not only heat energy, but also nuclear byproducts such as tritium and the ash from a nuclear reaction, that all-important indicator of nuclear fusion, helium.
It's clearly not possible to produce helium from a chemical process. The only possibility that remains is that the helium is produced by a nuclear process. If the helium is produced by a nuclear process, then necessarily there will be an associated release of heat. Having seen the effect with my own eyes, the claims from a few that this is impossible, inconsistent with all known laws of nuclear physics, these suggestions are in fact irrelevant.
That well said. But notice how important the tritium was in this. And they thought it was a fraud because they didn't find the other things that usually go with fusion, with hot fusion. There wasn't the ionizing radiation, but there was transmutation too.
But what is the best way to sell big government and then world government to a people like ours, historically devoted to an independent republic of limited powers? The answer is simple. Deliberately create problems, and then offer only those solutions that result in the expansion of government. Create conditions so frightful at home and abroad that the abandonment of personal liberties and national sovereignty will appear as a reasonable price for a return to domestic tranquility and world peace. If those who seek world dominion can stimulate a violent confrontation with local law enforcement, and also provide exhaustive news coverage so that the entire nation can see and tremble, then the peaceful and freedom-loving majority can be programmed to accept a vast expansion of government powers and even a national police force, offered supposedly to end the violence. If those who seek world dominion can raise the specter of an enemy armed to the teeth and also offer world government as the prevention, then millions of Americans can be programmed to accept the loss of national sovereignty as our last best hope for peace. This is the meaning of pressure from above and below. To put over police state measures at home, they need chaos. To sell the idea of world government,
Who can forget the day 19 suicidal Muslim terrorists hijacked planes and deliberately crashed them into the Twin Towers and the Pentagon? Who can forget when the Twin Towers collapsed under their own weight, overwhelmed by the intense jet fuel fires? Who can forget the outrage we all felt that day, knowing that 3,000 innocent people had been murdered in such a diabolic way? And all for what? All because a backward band of religious extremists were determined to destroy Western civilization? Is this story true? What on earth happened? The phenomena that we see on 9/11 are so powerful and so strange, it defies explanation. It will boggle your mind.
The towers didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground. They turned into dust in midair, 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 midair.
the ground, though we refuse to see. Dust in the wind. All we are is dust in the wind.
The towers didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground. They turned into dust in midair, 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 midair.
A sample on a police car turned out dangerous. Another sample a couple of blocks away, not dangerous. But most interesting, in the mix, they are looking, they think, at specks of steel that used to be beams and elevators, marble from the lobby floor and facings. So what were once the strongest architectural elements in the two towers were pulverized, large portions turned into clouds like this one. Still, there is this mystery. If some of the hardest materials were vaporized, how to account for the presence everywhere of paper, fully intact letters, business forms, stationery. Paper is so fragile and combustible, and yet somehow, maybe because we have so much of it, it was everywhere.
The towers didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground. They turned into dust in midair, 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 midair.